Hello and welcome to another Factorio tutorial video. I'm Exterminator and thanks for joining me. So this tutorial is going to be on mid-game combat. The previous tutorial video was on blue science and setting up the components for that, and I think it's a good next step to discuss the mid-game combat and different methods and tactics you can use to be successful at it. I've seen posts on the forums and Reddit occasionally with people saying, you know, like, I'm at blue science and the bases are getting pretty big and big biters are spawning and I don't know how to deal with it. And there's several different methods I'm going to show you here. The first is the tank. You can get the tank with blue science. It's pretty cheap, and then it unlocks the components for it and the cannon shells, which just require oil products. And it's pretty effective against most bases except for the very large ones. It has 1,000 health, and if you mouse over here once it's placed down, you can see it has pretty good resistances. Primarily the impact and physical are quite good. So you can run over biters and run over trees and stuff. It's just really beefy. So the tank is probably one of the best options. And another option you can go with is using distractor capsules. Now, these are also unlocked with blue science, though they're a bit more expensive. 200 of each to get to these guys, and they require multiple components. They're fairly expensive to make, but they're quite effective in large numbers. If you don't have many of them, they won't be very effective. But one thing that I prefer with distractors over destroyers is that, well, number one, they're cheaper, and number two, they're not limited by your robot follower account. Whereas the destroyers and defenders are, since they actually follow you. Distractors are stationary. They don't move. They stay where you throw them within this radius, and I think it spawns 2 or 3 per capsule. But the main thing is they're not limited by anything except the number of them you're able to throw out. So, you know, you could throw out 50 of these capsules, you know, and have like 150 robots out there shooting stuff. So these can be good in large numbers at this point in the game. In smaller numbers, they're not going to be very effective just because they're just going to get overwhelmed and swarmed. But they do laser damage, which is good because physical damage obviously doesn't do very much against the bigger biters. And then the last one I'm going to show you is the laser turret creep, which is pretty popular and probably one of the safest methods. I would suggest doing this if you're pretty new to the game and just kind of cautious and don't want to be too risky. The tank is fairly safe if you can like drive it somewhat decently and kind of know what you're doing, but it can still be a little risky because the one main weakness of the tank is getting surrounded. And as you can see here, I'm going to shoot this. This kills a spawner in 2 hits. And it can also kill these worms pretty quickly, even the big guys. Now you'll see the big ones actually do quite a large amount of damage. And it kills the smaller ones in 1 hit. And it can also outrange all these worms. And you can see, even after taking all those shots from those worms, I'm still at 3/4 health. And then these guys, I can just use my machine gun and shoot them. You can shoot them with the cannon shell, but it's a little harder to hit moving targets with it. As you can see, if you notice, it even missed the stationary worms sometimes. So I'm going to hop out here and repair it really quick and demonstrate on a bit larger base. Like I said, this is very effective against worms and smaller amounts of spawners. Up against a pretty large base, it is not quite as effective, to be honest with you. because you can just get surrounded so easily. And it's actually nighttime, which is quite unfortunate. Let's see here. Let me just go scout over this way. Okay, so this has 5 different spawners and some worms. This is doable with a tank if you can drive correctly. You know, if it seems a little risky, this would be a good situation to turret creep. And you could use distractor capsules if you have enough of them. I'm going to go ahead and actually show you the distractor capsules against this smaller base up here. Because 10 of them is a decent amount, but it's really not that many. 10 would not be able to take this out. And partly that's just because they're spread out so much. So I don't even need to throw all 10. If I just throw like a few on here, you can see they do quite a bit of damage. And as long as they're not being focused, they're very effective. But once they begin being focused, then it becomes a problem, as you can see. These guys kind of just rip through them. So I'm going to throw down some more just to help me cover these biters. But the fact that they do laser damage is good. Okay, so it's daytime now, and I can try to take out these spawners if I don't get surrounded. As you can see, if I get surrounded, I'm kind of screwed. So I'm trying not to hit these trees. And I now have this huge wave of biters behind me. You can see this has massive range, and if you can kite the enemies, you shouldn't really have much of a problem. But as you can see, once they start kind of getting up next to me and in front of me, it becomes a little bit more dangerous. And they can also block your fire. Now the worms I could get, but they don't obviously spawn biters, so I can just leave them. And now these guys, see, this is a problem. I mean, I could hit them with my machine gun, but it's not going to do very much. Poison capsules are the other method. They're surprisingly effective against worms, which I will show you in a minute. And they're actually quite effective against even just biters and spitters if you use them correctly. So I'm gonna kite these guys around, preferably not back to that base. I'm gonna kite them around to where I have some lasers here, and throw down some distractor capsules as well to help cover the fire. And as you can see, if you have somewhere to go back to, as long as you can kite them effectively, it is fine. Now, one thing that this brings a point up is that it's probably good, regardless of what method you're using, to have like a turreted protection zone you can kind of go back to. You know, just some turrets and walls kind of behind where you're coming from that you can head back to once you have a huge wave of biters behind you. But as you can see, so these poison capsules, now I could technically do this while I'm outside the tank. Especially against medium and small worms. The big worms will outrange this circle, but just to demonstrate, if I just throw it right on the edge here, now that's a big worm, which is what I really want to aim for. So I come over this way and run in really quick and throw it. I can do it without getting hit too many times. And the poison damages worms and biters and spitters. It does not damage spawners, so that's one thing to note. And it does stack. That's a very important thing to know, is the poison does stack. If I threw 10 of these on here, it would do 10 times the damage. Obviously, I only had 2. But you can see it damaged them. You would need a few more than that, but that's a very effective way to take out worms. So now for the last method, is I'm going to go find a bit of a larger base. Perhaps over here. And I'm going to show the turret creep method. which is pretty straightforward, and if you do it correctly and are a little bit cautious, it's by far the safest way to do things. It's just a really safe method to use, because if you do it correctly, it's kind of, I don't want to say indestructible, but it's very, very difficult for the biters to do much against it. And I'm trying to figure out how to get over here. I think this pole was a little bit misplaced. So you actually can't pick things up while you're in the tank, which is something else good to keep in mind. But as you can see, this thing is quite good at clearing forests. It's a little bit slow going, but not bad. Yeah, I mean, if you hit enough trees, it it will damage this. Now, I could go after this base right down here. It's really not that big. I want to demonstrate on kind of a larger, although that's right by the trees. So actually, let's just demonstrate here. So you're going to want plenty of lasers, plenty of power poles, and plenty of walls. I would say a minimum of, well, it depends how big the base is, but I would say a minimum of like 30 lasers, preferably a bit more than that. Just because how this works is you pretty much just like leapfrog forward with them. You set up like a base area here, and then I'm going to put some here just for protection, because as I walk forward I'm going to aggro them. But then you just slowly creep forward and place that down. And place walls. Obviously that was a very messy way to do it. But these guys will cover me as I put lasers down over here, which can then reach farther. And again, this is not a very big base. And then these guys should hopefully be able to reach the worms, and you will lose a few. You will lose a few lasers, that is for sure. As you can see, it just took out that whole base without much of a problem. I only used like 33, 32 lasers. Lost one or two. That had quite a few worms and not many spawners. If we pick this up and go try out that larger base really quick, I can show its true effectiveness. And this will work on even quite larger bases than this one, if you just do it smart. If you're just smart about it. One way to do it that's not smart is to run too far, too close to it before placing your initial row. And because if you aggro them without already having turrets down, you have to be able to place the turrets really, really quickly. Otherwise you're going to die and lose all your power poles and stuff. So I'm just going to pick these up. I'm not going to bother with the wall. And head over to this base. Now this one is a bit more tricky because there are quite a few trees in the way. Alright. I'm just going to clear them out. If you have grenades, poison capsules do a great job at this. I'm just going to clear them out a little bit so I can place this down. As you can see, I aggroed them before I had no turrets. You just have to be very quick about it. Kite them around and you should be fine. I didn't even lose a turret. And then you just kind of slowly advance forward I'm gonna wait for these guys to kind of start dying. Now obviously I have power armor, so I'm not being quite as cautious as I normally would be, but you just don't want to get surrounded. And I'm just placing a ton of them. And then I just place more. And they can start hitting the bases, and while those are dealing with that, I'm going to take up the ones back here. And I haven't even used walls. If you have enough power, that's one thing you really need to make sure is that you have the power to support this, because lasers take a very large amount of power to fire. As you can see, it's not really a problem. That's why I suggest bringing like a minimum of 30 or preferably like 40 or so, unless it's just a very small base, because you have to creep like this. If I only had like 20 or so, I probably wouldn't be able to take on this base unless I was being very, very effective with my laser placement. But as you can see, I've taken out all the spawners except that one. And you could get closer if you have like just a submachine gun with ammo. You could just take this out and your lasers would still cover you. All my ammo is in the tank right now. So I'm just going to stick these here. They should be able to reach it. These guys cover them when anything spawns. And I'm done. I just took out 6 spawners with pretty much no problem with this method. And you can combine these methods, obviously. You know, laser creep and throwing poison capsules on top of the worms, or if there are any, or even on top of the spawners to damage the biters as they spawn, can be very effective. You know, doing a laser creep and then getting in your tank and helping out can be very effective. Distractor capsules thrown in there can be great. So I just wanted to kind of demonstrate probably what I consider the 3 main methods for taking on bases at this point in the game, which is probably considered mid-game. You know, I've researched a few blue science things, and you know, I do have purple science things right now in this game, but I haven't used any of them in this video on purpose to demonstrate that you don't need those. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful. If you're newer to the game, which is, you know, these tutorials are specifically for people who are quite new to the game. If you are newer to the game and having problems dealing with bases in the mid game, you know, once big biters and spitters have started to spawn, then hopefully you found this helpful and it kind of gives you an understanding of different ways you can approach the combat. And I mean, you can just turtle in your base if you want, but if you ever want artifacts, or if you have to clear bases out that are right around your factory, you're gonna need to go out and kill them, obviously. So hopefully seeing this will kind of give you some ideas and help you out. But I think that is going to be it for this video. And yeah, the next video, I'm not quite sure what it will be on, but it'll probably be a little bit later into the game. So again, I hope you found this helpful. If you have any other questions, comments, feedback, I'd love to hear them in the comment section below. I read all the comments and I will respond and try to help out or answer questions, etc. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I do hope you enjoyed. But until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and take care.